I would like to begin with this statement. We either submit to God or we play God. We either submit ourselves to what God has given to us, either we submit ourselves fully to what God has instructed to us, or we challenge it and play God. Now, later you'll understand the meaning of this. Young people, understand very carefully because you will grow up to this kind of society 10, 20 years from now. And it's not an easy generation that you will face in the next 10 to 20 years if God will tarry. Either we submit to God or we play God. Either we accept and submit to God's instructions or we play around and trying to manipulate what God has already laid before us. It was very clear. A man shall leave his father and his mother and be united to his wife. So I don't know how will they say that in the future. I think the church has a major role in the preaching of the gospel. Let's start building our foundation in our families. I think it's very, very important. It should start from our families, building our families in the foundation of God's word. Let us submit to God. Let us not play God in whatever God is giving to us. The issue is not new. Listen carefully. The issue that we're tackling today in the world is not really new. We can trace the very issue back in the Garden of Eden. Allow me to give you a glimpse again. The issue is still the same. Remember the temptation of the enemy to Adam and Eve? God created Adam and Eve. It's very clear. And here comes the temptation of the enemy saying to Adam and Eve, you can be God. You will know good and evil. The temptation in the Garden of Eden is still the same. It's about control. And Adam and Eve yielded to it, and ever since from that time on, mankind, you and me, have been playing God in the way we live our lives, in the way we treat each other. We are playing as if we are in control of our lives and trying to control the lives of others. We tend to forget easily that our lives is a daily mercy. We live because God allowed us to live. If God doesn't allow us to breathe again in the next 5 seconds, He can do it. And we all just fall down from our chairs. Life is a daily mercy. We live because God allowed us to live. But we act and live as if we have the right to live. We behave as if we are in control of others and our lives. We play God both when we treat others and the way we live our lives. Allow me to give a title to our conversation today as we continue our series on the book of James, Playing God. Why playing God? Because that's what we do. We try to control the lives of others, we try to control our surroundings, and we try to control the destiny and the planning of our lives. Here comes James unpacking before us a very important passage and truth in his letter, and he ended the past sermon last Sunday talks about humility. Humility is very important. It is humbling ourselves and realizing that we are not in control. And here James continuing that conversation in his readers, in his letter. And if there is one very important truth that I want you to catch is this. Life is a privilege, not a right. It's privilege because it is granted to us. Privilege because it is given to us, and it means it can be taken back anytime. Privilege because it is a mercy. It is a special favor. Life is a privilege. It is not a right. A right means entitlement. You're not entitled. We don't have the moral and the legal right of our lives. It is only given to us. So let us not live our lives as if we have the right to live, as if we have the right and the in complete control of what is going on and what we want to happen. It is a special favor. It is not an entitlement. Ang nakakalungkot po kasi parang minsan pag nabubuo ng yung pamumuhay natin, para bang tayo ay entitled sa buhay. No. Remember the parable of the rich fool that Jesus told in Luke? That here comes a man put up his business, earn a lot of money for himself, and he said, I will build these barns and so on and so forth. I will live my life sitting pretty na lang ako. And then the Lord reminded that rich fool and said, tonight I'm going to take your life back. And he was surprised. That rich fool became full, not because he's rich, but he was full because he left God out of the equation and he played God and forgot that life is a privilege. It is not a right. Now, knowing this truth will help us understand and keep us from being boastful and prideful. It will keep us from being arrogant. Now, why do you have to listen to this sermon? Pastor Butch, why is this message important to me? Because that unless we understand this very important truth, we will be boastful. Because if we live our lives as if we have the right, ang tendency po noon, ang buhay natin ay nagiging mayabang tayo, and we live this life as if God does not exist and as if we have the right to do what we want to do. As I go through the passage in James chapter 4, and this is the very truth that James was hammering to his first readers. The first verse, in verse 11, he said, James was saying, brothers, do not slander one another. I don't know why James started with that very word. In the previous verses, we were told about fighting and quarreling and warring against each other. And here comes James, brothers, do not slander one another. If you read it again and again, and if you open your eyes, there seems to be a contradiction there. Because we're brothers. How come that we as brothers, we're speaking against each other? You notice that? If there is no brother there, it can be understandable. In the world, maybe hindi tayo magkakapatid, hindi tayo magkaibigan. Yes, we can speak and magsiraan tayo, but we're brothers. So James is emphasizing there, hey, you belong to one family. You have one common denominator, that is your relationship with Jesus Christ. You stop slandering one another. The word slander is a broad word in the original translation of the New Testament. The word slander is to make false charges or misrepresentations that damage a person's reputation. So stop going around and telling people and trying to destroy the reputation of your brother or your sister. Obviously, the church or the 12 tribes of believers, the Jewish believers that were scattered in Asia Minor that James was writing, they were speaking against each other. And James is saying, hey, what's going on with you? You're supposed to be loving each other because you're brothers. Okay, listen carefully. Young adults, singles, and youth, you will have your own family. I think the best message you can give to your family is love each other. Someday we will leave our children in this world. They will have their own families. Parents would always give that advice, love one another. Siblings, love one another. You don't speak against each other. That's exactly what James was trying to say. The verb that James used is expanded to any form of speaking against one another. Look at this. What is said may be true, Pastor Butch. Totoo naman yung sinasabi ko tungkol doon eh. Hindi dahil totoo, may karapatan kang sabihin. What is said may be true in its content, but harsh and unkind in the manner of its presentation. That's what James is trying to say. Later on, you understand why. It's interesting. The first reader in the first century, the first reader of James, look at it as slander means a third tongue. They call it as a third tongue. Pangatlong dila. Why is it a third tongue? Because it kills 3 people. It kills 3 people. When you slander, you destroy 3 persons. Paano nangyari yung Pastor Butch? Who are the 3 persons? The speaker, the one being spoken to, and the one that is being spoken about. So those 3 persons are killed in the conversation. That's why it's called third tongue. Do not speak evil against each other. Do not defame. Nowadays, it may not be said to us verbally, but again, through multimedia, through Instagram, through the media that we're using in the internet, or the blog, or even in our Facebook, or in the Twitter, do not speak evil against each other. A defamatory word may be perfectly true, but we don't have the right to say it. Why? The word that was used by James, do not slander, it carries the idea that the speaker feels you are superior than the person that you are talking about. It gives you the superior feeling na kapag tayo ay naninira, what we're saying is, I am a better person than the person I'm talking about. You're getting it? Once a person is slandering, speaking against a brother or a sister, the person is assuming that he's better than that person. What we are actually saying, if we are defaming, is that we are better than the other person. It means we are talking down to them, adopting a superior status or position. That's why, listen carefully, defamation or slander is forbidden not as a breach of truth, because what you are saying may be true. It is not a breach of love, because somebody will say, I'm saying this because I love you. I'm saying this because I love that person. So, slander is not a breach of truth and neither a breach of love. It is a breach of humility. Why? Because when we are speaking against and trying to destroy another person, in other words, we're saying, I am better. So we become arrogant. So it's a breach of humility. Mayabang daw ho ang isang taong naninira ng iba. Yun ay mayabang na tao in Tagalog. It means we are assuming a position of superiority and we talk down on people and we're saying, so parang sinasabi, the next time you hear someone slandering people to you, you're saying to that person, so ibig sabihin, mas maganda ka? Ibig sabihin, mas gwapo ka doon sa sinasabi mo? Ibig sabihin, mas magandang tao ka? That's what you're saying. Hindi naman. So you stop doing it. James was saying to his readers who had fallen to the habit of criticizing one another. Mga kapatid, I hope dati sa atin sa church dito sa WIN-SQ, let's stop criticizing each other. Yung sinusulatan po ni James, they already are in the habit, naging habit na po nila, yung magsiraan. That's why James was saying, stop criticizing. Now listen, we play God when we criticize and when we speak against one another. We play God when we talk down, gossip, or slander on people as if we know we are better and we are better than them. Why is James saying, stop criticizing? Why? Look at this. James defended that in saying, because anyone who speaks against his brother or judges him, so he equates speaking against and judging is the same. Para mo na nihinusgahan yung kapatid mo, sabi ni James. Anyone who judges him speaks against the law and judges it. What law was he talking about? Leviticus. It's the royal law that says, love your neighbor as yourself. So when we speak against each other, we are violating the very royal law that God gave to His people. If one does not submit to the law, to that royal law, but instead violate it in a way, that person is saying, the law is nonsense and sets himself above it. Bakit ko susundin yan? Walang kwenta yung law yan. Yun pala ang ibig sabihin. When we slander one another, we are violating the law. In other words, we're saying, hindi ko sinusunod yung law yan dahil walang kwenta yan eh. So you set yourself above the law. You get it? The law of Singapore, for example, traffic law. Do not cross when it's red. When we violate it, as if we're saying, wala namang kwenta yung batas nyong yan eh. Delikado ka sa batas ng Singapore. One should violate the law. It means you set yourself high above the law and say, the law is nonsense. So that's what James is trying to say. Anyone who speaks against his brother or judges him speaks against the law and judges the law. When you judge the law, James said, you are not keeping it. Of course, you're disobeying it. But instead, you are sitting in judgment on it. What is James trying to say? You are playing God. Why? Because God is the lawgiver. And you're saying, you're no better. You're above the law. Meaning you are playing God. You see, that's what James is trying to say. When we judge others, we play as if we are better than them, as if we are God, that we have the right to say whatever we want to say. When we speak evil and judge one another, this is what's going on. When we disregard the law, when we disregard the words of God, it means we are playing God I will not obey God because I am better than God. We seek control. Look at this. James is saying, there is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? Here, pag binasa niyo po ito, parang walang dating. But actually, James was very blunt in rebuking the people. In Tagalog, nakalimutan mo yata kung sino ka. Sino ka ba? Who are you? James is saying, there's only one lawgiver. God is the lawgiver. And what you're doing is you're assuming God's position. Who are you? I don't know how hurtful these words, but the readers of James were bluntly rebuked by James. Stop criticizing one another. Because when you are criticizing one another, you're speaking against each other, you are acting as if you're God. You are putting yourself in the position above the law, the royal law that says love your neighbor as yourself, and you're assuming that position as if you're better than your brothers. And when you set yourself above the law, meaning you are better than God, and you know what you're doing, and you're playing God. No human being has any right to judge any other human being. The right of judgment belongs to God alone. When I slander a person, I am hurting the father because that is another brother. That's another son. If you're a parent and someone is maligning your son or your daughter, you feel hurt for your daughter and your son. I think God is feeling the same way. When we assume to know better and we try to criticize our brothers and sisters, I think we are violating and hurting our Father, the lawgiver and the judge. How can we criticize? We have no idea or the full knowledge of the person's lives. How can we really judge a person? We don't really know the person that well. Hindi natin alam kung anong pinagdadaanan ng tao, kung bakit ganun siya mag-behave. Baka lumaki siya ng walang nanay at walang tatay. Baka lumaki siya na pinamigay siya ng magulang. That's why maybe he's like that. And we don't have the idea, the whole idea of why the person is behaving. We don't have the whole knowledge of why a person is behaving that way. And here we are with the glimpse of the idea trying to destroy. James is saying we don't have the right. How can we criticize? How can we judge one another when we don't have the full idea of what is going on? Several reasons why people tend to criticize and judge. Why do we judge? Why do we criticize? Because it boosts our own self-image. Mas magaling ako dyan. Kasi when you talk about that, it means, I am better. You're trying to improve your self-image and you feel better. Di ba may mga taong, katawagan ka, anong chika natin ngayon? Uy, natawa kayo. Siguro ganun ang... diba? Kamusta? Anong chika natin ngayon? Anong skandalo ngayon? Sino ngayon ang star? We criticize because it makes us feel that our own lives are better than the lives of others. And it helps us justify our decisions and action. Kaya ako mas maganda eh. Kaya ako better yung ginawa ko kasi sila hindi ganun eh. So that's the problem. And you know what? We criticize and we judge or we speak against one another. Why? Because it is an outlet of our hurts. Tayo mismo hurting. Kailangan mailabas mo yung galit mo eh. So ibinubungtong natin sa iba. No wonder James is saying to his readers, stop speaking against one another. You're violating the royal law. We're supposed to be loving one another. And we play God when we judge. How do we play God? When we judge one another because you're setting yourself high above as if you're God, that you can speak and talk down on other people. We forget that life is a privilege. We don't have the right to do that to our neighbors. Para kasi tayo, feeling natin entitled tayo, that we are better, that my life is far better than my brothers and sisters. Then look at this. James proceeded addressing the businessman or the whole congregations or maybe the merchants in his readers. Now listen. Parang sinasabi ni James, okay, come, listen. Give me your ears. Listen to this. You say today or tomorrow. Okay, listen very carefully. We will go to this and that city and spend a year there, carry on business, and make money. So what is he doing? As if the picture is a businessman laying down the map of the world and say, let's go to Canada, let's go to Europe, let's go to Africa, let's go to Australia, and all the different parts of the world, and say, let's put up a business there, or maybe find work there, make money. And they were planning and strategizing. Is there something wrong with that? No. What is wrong with that is James is saying later on, where is God in the planning? We play God when we plan, and we do not involve God because we, as if we feel, I'm God, I know what's going on. And here comes James saying, no. That's presuming as if God does not exist. Why? You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. How many of us have made plans for our lives in the next 20 years and we forget God in the equation, only to find out the following day or the following morning, a change of direction happened in our lives. We don't know if we are still alive in the next week, next day, next month. Because life is a privilege. It's only given to us. Life is not a right. It's a privilege. It can be taken from us anytime. Huwag tayong mabuhay as if tayo ay may control ng kalangitan o ng buong future natin, as if we are playing God with our lives and saying, God, I want to do this, I want to do... You're removing God, and as if you're God trying to plan your course and your destiny. Planning is not bad. Setting objectives is not bad. It is only foolishness when we do it without God in the equation. Young people, maybe you're planning for your future. It's good. Maybe you're dreaming for something for your career. It's good. But don't do it alone. Don't play God. Because anything can happen in the next few weeks. Maybe you're saying, I'm saving a lot of money. I'm going back to the Philippines. I'm putting up this business, whatever. Oh, that's a good plan. But see to it that God is involved. Otherwise, all these plans will come to nothing because life is a privilege and not a right. We live by daily mercy of God. If God will not allow it, it will not happen. Stop playing God. James is saying, remember, you're ignorant. You don't really know what's going on. You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. Do you know what will happen tomorrow? No. How can we live and conduct our lives and play God as if we are in control when we don't really know what's going on? And then James challenges his readers, what is your life? What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. The mist that covers Israel and the valleys of Jordan, maybe they are surrounded by mist in the morning, early in the morning like a mist there. But suddenly in the afternoon, about 10 o'clock, the mist is gone. Sometimes we appear to be very healthy outside, but later on we are shocked when there are some news that our bodies is decaying. We are not in control. Life is a privilege, not a right. Huwag tayong mabuhay as if karapatan natin na mabuhay. Na Lord, karapatan kong lumigaya, karapatan kong mabuhay. To be happy is good, but submit yourself to God. Because the reality is, unless God allows it, it will never happen. The uncertainty of life is not a cause, either for fear or for inaction. It is a reason for realizing our complete surrender or dependence on God. Dahil kahit anong plano natin, kung ang sarado ang pintuan at hindi bubuksan ng Diyos, nothing will ever happen. Instead, you ought to say, dapat sinasabi ninyo, if it is the Lord's will, we will go to this and that city and live our lives. Dapat daw ganon. Ang isang taong may takot sa Diyos, we are not excusing God in the equation. Rather, we're saying, Lord, I acknowledge you. If it is your will, these are my plans. If it is not your will, I'm okay. That's dependence. And that's submission. Because we don't know what lies tomorrow. Let us not play God in the planning of our lives. So James is saying, if it is the Lord's will, we will live to that and that city. Yes, planning is good. Don't stop. Baka naman hindi na tayo nagpaplano. Sabi natin mamaya, pag uwi natin, honey, wag na tayo magplano, maghintay na lang tayo sa Diyos. Wrong. Planning is not bad, but involve God. Come to God in prayer. Lord, gusto namin pumunta ng ibang bansa, Panginoon. Lord, if it is your will, please bless our effort, Lord. Ito ba ang paraan, Panginoon? Is this the right direction for us? Involve God in our lives. That's what James is trying to say. It is only if God wills it and allows it, then it will happen. The early Christians, they always put these words in their letter. The initial DV, Deo Volente, meaning, if God wills. They will always inscribe that in their letter saying, if it is God's will, if it is the Lord's will, it will happen. Because James is trying to say, life is a privilege. It is not a right. Hindi ibig sabihin ni James, every time na lang in our words we say, if it is the Lord's will. Kumain ka na, Pastor, if it is the Lord's will. Come on, wake up na, 7 o'clock, let's go to church. Mama, if it is the Lord's will. James is not saying that because that's arrogance. Or maybe we're bragging, if it is the Lord's will, I will go. It's in your heart that you depend on God. James is not banishing planning from our lives, but only trying to address the self-sufficiency and self-important planning that keeps God away and involved in our lives. Look at this. As it is, James is saying, you boast and brag. You see, if we play God, we're arrogant. Nagyayabang tayo. Alam mo, ito ang plano ko, pastor eh. Ganito, pastor eh. Ito mangyayari, pastor eh. Parang ang yabang ng dating. You're bragging and you're boasting. And James addressed it so bluntly and said, that is evil. Boasting is evil because God is not in the equation. Life is a privilege, not a right. The impact of this truth, it keeps us humble and dependent on God. Without this truth, we are boastful and bragging. Di ba? Ang lakas naman ng dating nito. Di ba? Minsan may kausap ka, uy, ang lakas ng hangin ngayon ah. Makakuntik tayong liparin ah. Because this person is bragging as if he holds the future, as if he holds everything that will happen in the next 6 months or a year. But James is saying, you don't even know what will happen tomorrow. Your life is frail. Your life is brevity of life is short. And here comes the conclusion as we end. James is saying, anyone, now that's for all of us. Without the anyone, only the readers of James. But anyone, that includes us, anyone then, therefore, who knows the good he ought to do and doesn't do it, what? Sins. What is he saying about the good? The good that James is talking about is not boasting. The good is dependent on God. Dumipende ka sa Diyos. Sumabmit ka sa Diyos. Parang sinasabi ni James, now you know. I warned you. Now, if you continue to do that, it's your sinning. If you continue to do and live as if you're God, you are committing a terrible sin. Now that we all heard this, if we still continue to live our lives and play God on others and on our lives, we are sinning. Anyone then who knows the good he ought to do, what is the good that he ought to do? To submit to God, to depend on God. And if we do not do it, we're sinning by not boasting and bragging. James is saying, I pointed to you the matter. There is no more excuse. It's your choice. Knowing what should be done obligates us, a person, to do it. Kumusta? Mga kapatid, let's not play God because either we submit to God or we play God. Life is a privilege, not a right. Binigyan tayo ng buhay ng Diyos. God has given us life. It can be taken away from us anytime. Huwag tayong mabuhay para bang pag-aari natin yung buhay at may karapatan tayo sa buhay. No, we are only living in a daily mercy from God. Panginoon, sa umaga when you wake up and your heart is still beating, Lord, thank you for your mercy that you allow me to live again. Because we don't know. Maybe the last night we sleep, that will be the last night. Praise God. We're still alive and live our lives in total submission and dependence on God. Don't play God. Don't judge other people. And don't play God on others in our lives as if we are in control. The reality is nothing will ever happen unless God permits it. Therefore, my challenge is don't play God. Let us cultivate dependence on God, not independence. When we boast and when we brag, It is sinful because it is admitting or implying that we are better than God. So young people, singles and young adults, maybe you have a lot of plans, families, plans for the future. That's good. But what God is telling to us today is reminding us our lives is a privilege, not a right. So we ought to say, Lord, if it is your will, let it be done. We will do this and do that for your glory.